Good morning, everybody. It is 9:08 a.m. on Wednesday morning, coming at you early morning for the first time, I think, ever. But coming at you guys early morning. I know one of these days we'll get down to a set time. We're working on it. We're working on putting some more time into it. But I thank you guys for joining me regardless. Remember, if you do not have the time to sit through this, because it is live broadcasted on Facebook and YouTube. But at the same time, if you find this on YouTube or Facebook and you don't have the time to sit there and you leave that open to listen to it, you can always go to the podcast, which is on Spotify and Apple, and you can go ahead and listen to it there as well. I'm just recording it early this morning. It's just when I had time. This evening, I will be in Northern Kentucky talking to the Northern Kentucky Tea Party. And if you're in the area, Brick House Tavern, I invite you out to check that out too as well. But I thank you guys so much for joining me. Even this early morning, I know it's a surprising time, but please go ahead and hit that share button as well down there in the corner. Share us out this morning as we kind of dig into this as well. Go ahead and hit that share button. As always, if you want to support us, you can come by the coffee shop. It's a good time to do it. It's morning, right? Good time to get your coffee at Malibu and Nicholasville. As well, you can always buy our coffee online at shop.brewedco.com, BREWEDCO.com. You can also donate to our cause at donate.brewedco.com. Well, today we're going to be talking about, first two as well. I just want to thank everybody for their support and mobilization. I got some amazing reach outs over the last couple of days, and it's an honor to get these reach outs from people who are just supporters and fans, of course, but also as well looking to get involved in their own communities with their own liberty issues. Whether that's to deal with schools or another was having an issue to do with the protest they want to do over a local issue, a local tax, whatever it may be. And I'm so honored that they reach out to me and ask, how do I do this? How do I mobilize? How do I get things done? And I'm glad to be an inspiration or a push for anybody that is looking to mobilize and get liberty done all over the country, whether it's here or in Kentucky or anywhere in the country, because I know a lot of people listen and follow us nationwide too as well. And that's really an honor. So thank you guys so much for that support. And as always, you can always support us by once again hitting the share button, sharing us out there, sharing the podcast out with people. We posted a video yesterday, the video of the protest that occurred on Saturday or Sunday last week. We went ahead and posted their video up yesterday morning at 9 a.m., and I can tell you that it was interesting to watch some of the reactions. Of course, we had done that purposely delayed release, not just because we wanted to release it as kind of a bigger package with some of the other behavior from the day. Of course, we hadn't talked or mentioned about the shoving and the hitting that occurred to the camera guy at that protest. We hadn't mentioned that before. And it was partly to do, we just wanted to throw it up there to kind of walk them into a corner, because I don't know if they thought we didn't have the footage or what have you. But, you watch that footage, you look at what the individual, especially the one pulling the knife, had said had happened. You look in the video, you clearly don't see it happen. To remind everybody what they said happened was that the cameraman was getting up in their face. Now, as you can clearly tell in the video, the cameraman is far away from them and is just recording. The cameraman's job is to record Brood's events. They showed up to counter-protest our event. They're at our event. It's a free open area. They can show up if they want to. They can say whatever they want. But you are not free from being recorded for doing so. And so he was originally over there just in order to basically record the counter protest, to be a part of the video, part of the live, and a part of the overall going out video. And they started wanting to argue with him back and forth, because they could tell they knew he was with us, with Brood, and so they wanted to start something with him. And, he just recorded, and you watch those videos. He didn't name call. He didn't tote. He didn't gun. And, I'm quite shocked by some of the behavior I've seen from reported supporters and people on our side of things somewhat. I see some of them being like, and what I mean is they say they're on our side. I don't know if they are, but I see someone be like, well, why even record? Just stay across the road. First off, we can record wherever we want to. We're allowed to do that. Second off, you act as if the left doesn't do the exact same thing to us constantly. And third, and first and foremost, a lot of these people coming out and saying, I don't know if I like you videotaping or anything like that. Do you forget? It struggles me sometimes when I don't realize, like, this isn't a normal disagreement. What we're talking about here is people that want to close your business, close down your lives, stop you from seeing your family, make you wear a mask for the rest of your lives because, as we read in the Atlantic article, it's the ultimate virtue signal to them. Force you to get vaccinated if you don't want to get vaccinated. Limit what you can do, where you can drink, what you can eat. Come in and use the reins of government to force you to do what they want you to do. And you're worried about, well, I don't know if we should be videotaping them. I can tell you this much. I thank everybody for their support constantly. But there comes to a point where there's a time to fight and push and there's a time not to. And we need to fight and push. And fighting and pushing doesn't mean physically getting into it, but it does mean being active. It does mean we're going to have to do things. We can't just sit there and stand there and just show up and say, I support liberty and I'm going to stay home all the time and everything else. You need to show up to protests. You need to engage online. And you also don't need to be willing not to get violent, but engage with people when they're out and about and they're spouting off things, terrible things that you don't agree with. And you need to do that because it hasn't worked in the past. We have gotten to where we are because we have failed to fight for liberty. And now that we are where we are, and now we're fighting for liberty, we're doing things like saying, no, we're not going to just sit there and okay, well, they're just over there and we're over here and we're not going to record them when they're behaving like animals because that's not the right thing for us to do, we think. That's not what we're going to do. And we shouldn't do that because that kind of thinking is how we got here. That's how we've lost our freedoms. We're not willing to fight for them. They're willing to do whatever they can to take from you. Now, there's lines I won't cross. Like I said yesterday, I will not personally try to get anybody fired. Okay, I personally will not do that, even when I think their behavior is very unbecoming. Is very unbecoming. And even when it worries me about what their behavior is unbecoming, and to give you an example, I'm not going to tell who, I'm not going to do anything like that. It's not important because, once again, I do not try to get people fired. But one of the people at that counter protest works in the for CHFS, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, the group that handles policy administration, the COVID policy administration to the health departments. Okay? The group that tried to intercede into the case to take us to court, the group that is trying to take away our liquor license, they are there counter-protesting us, standing up to the powers that be. Of course, they're going to throw up a fight. They don't want their own powers taken away. And when they're those kinds of people, you need to stand up and you need to say, no, enough's enough. And we can't, like I said, we cannot keep doing the things we've always been doing and expect a different result. We have lost our liberties, and we've gotten to this point because we have been doing these things that are not fighting. They're not fighting. They're not. So show up to protest. Make your voices loud and heard. Spread it around. Bring your friends out so they know you're not alone. Engage in civil disobedience when you're out there, and continue to fight and continue to engage, not violently, because as we can see, if you do anything remotely violently, especially if a camera's watching, it can end badly for you. But we need to stand. We do need to stand. Because we can't keep losing our freedoms and doing the same thing. And that's just my humblest opinion on it. I know to some of you guys that sounds radical, but you know what? Liberty is a radical idea. It is no longer in the middle. It has been defined by the left has pushed everything so far to the left that the middle has moved so far to the left that now liberty, what our country was founded on, is a radical idea. And you know when our country was founded on liberty? It was radical at that time too. And that's when they need people the most to come in and fight for liberty, is when it is considered a radical idea. So that's just on the video yesterday. I just think, it's clear their behavior's bad, unbecoming, terrible, especially for government workers. But, what do you expect, right? I mean, that's how they behave. That's why we wanted to videotape it. We know how they behave. We know they're terrible people. And we know they will not stop being terrible people just because you throw them on a camera, and we want the world to see that these are the people that pretend to care about you. At least that's just our opinion. Hopefully you guys continue to support us as far as it goes. If you do support us, please hit the share button. Tell people about us. Donate.broodco.com. Of course, shop.broodco.com too as well. But anyways, moving on from that, the unions are infighting. The school unions are fighting, and it is glorious. So to give you a little background, so you have KEA, Kentucky Education Association. So this is a greater part of NEA, which is the National Teachers Union. This is actually the largest union in the country. And this is the same union that the Fayette County School Board member, Tyler Murphy, who I detailed in a prior podcast, is a member of that board, NEA board, and a Fayette County Public School Employee Board, which, considering that NEA engages in collective bargaining through their satellite region, KEA, it seems like a conflict of interest, and that's why we have our petition going out to ask him to step down and be removed, because it is clearly a conflict of interest as far as it goes. But on top of that, so you have KEA. Now, for a long time, you'd hear a lot of people be like, oh, the teachers' union's in Kentucky. And people would be like, there's not a teachers' union, it's an association. Rah, 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 rah. Now, what's real funny is now that 120 AFT has came along. Now, 120 is the group from 120 Strong. So 120 Strong is like the grassroots of teachers. And it's weird that there's a grassroots for teachers, because that just sounds like the grassroots of, I don't know. That's just like a weird thing to be like. Do the police have a grassroots activist group? Does the fire department have a grassroots activist group? Does the highway department have a grassroots activism group? No, they don't. But the teachers have a grassroots activism group because, well, half of our budget goes to education. And when half of a budget, let's keep in mind that the Louisville schools has a budget over $1 billion a year. When you have industries totaling billions of dollars a year in this state, you get a unions because that's where power is. Unions are all about power, as obvious based upon their argument. This isn't about the kids. It never has been about the kids. Unions don't give two cares about your kids. The founders of unions said, we are for the teachers, not the kids. That's who they care about. They care about the teachers. There's billions of dollars on the table, and they want their chunk, they want their piece, and they want their power that comes along with controlling billions of dollars. That's what the unions are all about. That's what the unions are all about. And so KEA for a long time said, I'm not a union. I'm just a collective bargaining organization. Well, now that's bit them in the butt, because the grassroots organization, 120 Strong, that's now 120 AFT United, whatever it's called, has filed as an official union. And apparently the infighting is because KEA is losing members to 120 United. Now, one of the co-founders of 120 United is that wonderful Nima Brewer. I don't know if you guys remember who she is, but remember, she's the one who, when they passed school choice, said she wanted to start cutting throats of legislators. So, that wonderful, fine specimen. And honestly, I would say, she's mainly active on Twitter. I'd say you go check her out, but just don't even bother. The tweets are F word, and you're a scab, and I'm pro-union. And that's pretty much her entire Twitter log, because of course she's the classiest human that has ever lived. And so because of this, it's come back to bite him in the butt that this union's formed and trying to get together. Now, Neiman Brewer was interviewed for an article for the Herald Leader, and in it, she said, well, the whole reason why we formed this union was because we didn't have 120 grassroots. We didn't have a seat at the table, and we didn't like how KEA negotiated the pensions this past legislative season. So because of that, because we didn't have a seat at the table, and because we didn't like how they negotiated our pensions, we wanted to form a union, so they had to listen to us because unions have legal bargaining power. Which I didn't hear one iota in that entire article I read. I think it's in the Herald Leader today. In the entire article I read, I did not see one iota of mention of the kids, because it's not about the kids. It never has been about the kids for them, as I said earlier. And so they don't care about the kids; they care about their power. And Neiman Brewer and co-founders are upset that that KEA didn't listen enough to 120, so they went and formed a union. And now KEA is like, no, we are a union, despite the fact for years, a lot of us who engage in the online conversating of talking about the teachers' unions in Kentucky have been scolded for calling them a union. They now are gladly portraying themselves as a union. It's funny how when it gets convenient, they are exactly what we've said they always are, but they used to ignore it, but now that it's useful and it's convenient for them, they go ahead and they want to get it done. Seems kind of odd to me. But anyway, so they're pulling members away from KEA. KEA is upset about it. So, they're infighting in there and just trying to get control over this budgetary situations and everything else because, poor teachers. I don't know. This is what's so weird. I've always found the education and this idea of teachers necessarily being the worse off individuals in government, which I hear that quite a lot, is it's always been a little bit of an odd argument to me, only because if you look at, for state Kentucky, for example, you look at the average person with a bachelor's degree's income, and then you look at what the average teacher in Kentucky is paid. And they're paid more than the average bachelor degree person earns in Kentucky. And so I'm like, well, that's confusing because, they work, a normal full-time job just like they do. And they're paid more than the average they would for the degree. But on top of that, this line about teachers being underpaid and being really thankless and sucky has been around for a long time. I know it has, but yet people still decide to go into teaching. And so it's weird to me to decide to go into teaching believing it's a low-paying job and then complaining that it's a low-paying job. I don't know. And I'm not saying teachers are bad people. They're not bad people. They're good people. They do a job I don't want to do. But I do think, it's weird to me that they're paid more than the average bachelor's degree recipient in Kentucky. And, but yet, they're still not paid enough. I don't know. And, honestly, I don't really have a dog in that fight as much as to say half of our tax dollars here in the state go to them. But more importantly, this isn't the way to do it. You don't do it with unions in the first place. It's one of the worst ways to go about it. And this is why is that first off, public sector unions shouldn't even be legal in the first place because they're not bargaining with a company. They're bargaining with you, the taxpayer. And so every time a union makes a demand of an increase of pay, especially one that is ridiculous and far beyond the outlines of what is normal compensation for the state, you should be offended by that as a taxpayer. And the reason why is because those are your tax dollars that they are asking for. Those are your dollars. They're not the school's dollars. Those are your dollars. And, we over here and people are like, yeah, support the unions, cheer on the unions, as they literally take their chunk of money from yours dollars. That's what it is. Unions are taxpayer funded. They have to be. Public sector unions have to be taxpayer funded because they're funded by the teachers who get taxpayer money. Anyway, so the point is that they're fighting, and I think it's glorious because it just exposes them for what they are, which is a bunch of hacks that care about power. They don't care really about teachers because I tell you this much right now, I've seen a lot better plans coming out of private sector, especially a school choice and everything else that pays teachers much, much more money. And I can tell you this much, I would want to pay teachers a lot more money and good teachers a lot more money and be able to get rid of bad teachers. But, of course, unions don't let that happen, which is unfortunate. But, there it is. They're fighting, they're arguing, and I hope at the end of the day who really wins will be the taxpayer and the kids. But we'll see what happens. Talking about vaccinations, in that same Herald Leader article today on the front page, I think, they're talking about vaccinations. So Bashir, and I know this went over a lot of people's heads, didn't notice it because you guys don't watch Bashir's propaganda hour, and I often don't, but I caught something the other day where I watch it in the corner while I'm doing other things. I caught something the other day, though, and he had decided to change the way that Kentucky is counting vaccinations. So we went from having our vaccinations counted by the state, I guess, to now switching to getting our vaccinations counted by the CDC. And by doing this switch, we somehow added like 60,000 vaccinations. We went from like 1,780,000 people vaccinated to 1,825,000 people vaccinated. Like with one foul swoop, he added like another 60,000 vaccinations by just simply changing the way that we count our vaccinations. And that seems shady. He claims that this is how everybody else counts them. I don't know. It seems weird that he says we're the last state not counting them that way. Seems odd. But, timing aside, whether or not he decided to just add that on or not to make himself look better as he's trying to push towards that 2.5 million vaccination goal, we're still a long ways away from, and he's not going to hit it. We're going to talk about why in a second, but more importantly, and that goal he has set is really just a hostage negotiation, a condition, because he says it's a goal he came up with about when he will lift his mandates. Now, 22 states around this country have returned basically to normal operations, but yet not Kentucky, despite it having some of the lowest case counts constantly. But in this article, it doesn't talk about how he just added on 60,000 vaccinations by changing the way we count about it, but they do mention the 1.8 million mark. However, it says that yesterday, according to the data they saw, and this could be super wrong data. I mean, they don't say this in the article. It just seems like such a drastic drop that one has to almost think data is off. But according to all indicators, that yesterday the state only did 1,524 vaccinations. 1,524 vaccinations. Now, to give you an idea of why that number is significant, is about a week or two ago, we were doing 15,000 vaccinations a day, which was still low because before that we were doing closer to 50,000 a day. So we were doing 15,000 a day or 60,000 a week. And they were saying, well, the conditions, these lockdowns and mandates will last till July because we're not hitting Andy Bashir's arbitrarily chosen 2.5 million number. And I'm saying arbitrarily chosen because how do you arrive scientifically? Somebody spin up this math that gave us 2.5 million exactly. Somebody show me the math that gave us that exact number. Like, if this was scientifically based, wouldn't the number be not a perfect 2.5 million? Wouldn't it be? I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyways, point is we went from doing 15,000 a day to 1,500 a day. Now, they're saying this might last till July or anything else. When this first vaccine mandate rolled out, Bashir said it would take 4 to 6 weeks, he thinks, to hit it and everything else. Well, if we continue on that pace, if that is the real pace, 1,500 a day, we will not get these mandates lifted for another 442 days. Yep, 442 days until the mandates are lifted at this current rate. Now, methinks it won't last that long. Methinks that Andy Bashir is realizing that he is in a losing battle. He's in a losing battle because more and more people are coming over to our side of things. They're saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. The case count is low. The numbers are dropping. The mandates left in place, I can't even, most people are looking at them now figuring out, like, I don't even understand how this lowers the count. I mean, take mass out of it for a second. Like, how did ever closing bars at midnight, how did ever closing bars at midnight lead to lower COVID case counts? I will never know. I will never know. And anytime I try to search for articles about that, all I get is articles that say that it doesn't. And even off Google, not even just DuckDuckGo, but even off Google, I just get article after article that says, well, no, it doesn't really do anything, but hey, you know, it's there to make people feel like you're doing something. I mean, that's literally what these articles say. So most people are looking at it like these are dumb mandates. And then the mask mandate too. It's kind of dumb and silly. I mean, at this point, if you want to get vaccinated, you get vaccinated, right? And so this pace has slowed down massively to where we're looking at over a year to hit this number. So that has led to, I believe this is a nationwide problem, and that has led to supposedly next week them opening up emergency use authorization to 12 to 15-year-olds. Now, this leads me to ask a lot of questions. Like, for an example, who were the dunderheads? I know dunderheads, funny word. Who are the dunderheads who decided to have their children be the experiments to figure out this vaccine dose? Because they needed kids to test on to see what the proper dosage was. And who were first the ones who signed up for it? Like, who? Because when you look at the data, the data for the virus here, and I posted this the other day, and I feel people really need to know this. Under 20, entire country, according to the CDC. Now, once again, this is according to the CDC numbers, and the CDC only counts confirmed COVID deaths. Like, for an example, here in Kentucky, the CDC has this at 0 deaths, and the CDC has a 0 deaths, but the state numbers has 2 deaths under 20, just because of how they count it. But in the entire country, as of 4/28, this is 4/28's numbers, under 19 is 327 confirmed COVID deaths, 327 under 19 in the entire country. Why would you get an emergency use authorization approval for this vaccine anyways on that age group? It's not killing them, like, at all. Like, at all. Statistically, 0%. Like, according to case count, to death count, statistically speaking, it is 0%. It is every death matters. But statistically, comparing the two, the percentage chance of death if you get COVID for that age group is so small that's statistically considered 0. And so why would you, and this is where they lose me, right? You want to tell me emergency use authorization for people over 75. Okay, yeah. I mean, look, I look at the numbers, and if you take the entire COVID deaths, all the COVID deaths we have, and you subtract half of them away, and then add 100,000 from that other half. That's all the people who've died over 75. So something like 70% of all the deaths from COVID in the country have been from the age 75 and over. So you want to say we need emergency use authorization for that age group. I'm like, yes, I'm with you. You know, they're older anyways. Long-term side effects aren't as much of a worry here, and this is clearly a big issue for that age group. It's clearly deadlier than the flu, and we probably need to be getting a vaccine out to them as quick as possible, and then they can choose whether or not they want to take it. Always a choice for them whether or not they want to take it. The same way that I believe if you're sick with cancer and you're older and you're terminal, and if you want to take a treatment to handle that, and it's experimental, and you want to try that treatment out for it, I believe you should have that choice, and you can do that. So I believe the same way with the vaccine, that emergency use authorization for that makes sense. That makes sense to me. If you want to, there's an argument too for 65 plus, because now you go down and you say, okay, looking at the numbers, once again, from the CDC as of 4/28, if you take the ages of 65 and over, you end up with, 325,000 plus 123,000. You end up with 448,000, so pretty much all but right around about 100,000 of the deaths in this country from COVID have occurred over 65. Okay, yeah, I'm with you. That makes sense too as well. I guess once again, a little bit older and clearly a dangerous thing, more dangerous than they are. But then you go down and you start going down into the numbers and you're like, I don't understand. This isn't an emergency use authorization for them. I don't see it. I don't see 327 deaths under 18, according to the CDC, being an emergency use authorization. I mean, shoot, between 19 and 44, countrywide is 14,180 deaths. That is still right along the same way the flu. And I made this point the other day on Facebook where I said this. I said, would you agree? Let's say a new strain. Let's say there's an average flu season, and the current flu vaccines aren't working. Would you be in favor of the FDA doing emergency use authorization for a new flu vaccine that just came out? I don't know. I don't think I would be. Not for that age group. I don't know. I mean, well, me personally, I think everybody should have their own medical choices. So I think, arguing on the FDA standards, I think if you want to take something, you should kind of maybe be allowed to take it and that's between you and your doctor. But if the FDA is following its own standards, it wouldn't normally approve a vaccination for that use. And there is literally current medications in current development that would save more lives than the 227 that is between 5 and 18. So the 327, though, is 18 and under. There's currently medicines and treatments in process now that would save more than 327 people a year that can't get approved by the FDA. But yet, emergency use authorization for COVID-19 vaccine, absolutely send it out there. But yet, these other diseases and issues that are causing more deaths that there's treatments for can't get an authorization to be used. That standard makes no sense. And it makes me know that this is political. That's how you know it's political. You can't sit there and say they're following the science, trust the experts, when it's clear they're changing their own standards due to political pressure. And that political pressure is they need to hit a number of people vaccinated for them to feel like that they're accomplishing things. They have to hit a number to make them feel good about what they're accomplishing. Now, why do they need to do that? Because if COVID goes away, because we vaccinated the older people, or they can get vaccinated if they choose to, and a lot of higher percentage choose to do so because that makes sense. Once again, I talked about that earlier. And COVID stops running rampant and killing people. There's just COVID cases, but there's not a lot of COVID death. Now they don't have their control, and they also didn't get to solve the problem. See, if they're going to lose their control anyways, if government can at least be the one who solves the problem, you will continue to return to them to solve your other problems. That's how they will make it. That's how they're planning on making it. And so if you don't get vaccinated, deaths go away, that's a problem for them. I mean, we saw that on CNN, that one Dr. something, I don't know. She used to be in charge of Baltimore and Planned Parenthood, and testifies in Congress about COVID. And she's like, time is running out for us to tie vaccinations to openings because the virus is just kind of naturally going out on its own. It's so true, because they want to make sure government has the control. If it just goes away, they don't. So I believe they're opening this up younger to be able to get those numbers open up, get those vaccine numbers up. And I think the medical community is justifying it to themselves under that same auspices I just said, that if they don't they may not listen to us on the next thing, or if there's a variant or something. So we need to make sure we get them all vaccinated, because they love the smell of themselves so much. No, it's not even that. It's that, if you spend your whole life studying infectious diseases, you too would think people are all going to die from every second of human interaction. It's just human nature. But anyway, so they need to hit this number so they can say they solved the problem. So now they're opening it up to younger kids that don't need, once again, following the own FDA standards for approval for medicine. The problem is not big enough for the emergency use authorization for that age group. But yet that's not going to stop them. That's not going to stop them, is it? And that's not going to stop them from opening it up. And worse yet, people are so afraid that's not going to stop them from getting it. I mean, you're hearing Joe Biden during his address, he's saying that he was talking about the shot of hope, and he was talking about how somebody cried, I got it, and I cried because though I'm healthy and safe, my child, I was worried about my child and going out into the world, and my child's at home and contracting the disease and bringing it back home. And while I appreciate that fear, the child's age, in this case, the child's age was like right at 7 or 8 or 9 or so. And like I just went through the COVID data, that is just not a fear. If you don't have that fear, ma'am, when you are out during flu season, you should not have that fear during COVID season, because it is just not as deadly as the flu for your child. It's just not. But yet the fear-mongering from the media has made it to the point where when this woman got her vaccine shot, she cried because it meant she could go to the grocery store again and not have to worry about bringing something back home to her children. That is fear-mongering that the media and the politicians have partaken in. And they continue to partake in it when they double mask, even though they're vaccinated, and all these other things. And it's like, you don't even follow your own CDC recommendations. You don't even follow your own recommendations. I mean, Bashir comes out and says you don't need to wear a mask outside with groups less than 1,000 as long as you're 6 feet apart. Yet you always see him outside still wearing a mask. He doesn't even follow his own things when he tears it down. They're promulgating the fear out there because, one, they want you to get vaccinated, right? And if they don't promulgate the fear, people may not be afraid enough to get vaccinated, and they can't, once again, be the one to solve the problem. But that fear has had people thinking irrationally. I mean, there's recent studies done where it asked, I was asking people about what are the chances you end up hospitalized, you get COVID. And in a large chunk, I believe 40% of Democrats believe if you get COVID, it's a 50-50 shot you end up in the hospital. 50-50 shot. And it's more like 2%. 1% chance you end up in the hospital. Depending on your risk group, could be statistically 0% chance you end up in the hospital. But yet they have people believing if you get COVID, you're going to die. And it's ridiculous. And honestly, that should be the biggest crime that we take away from. That should be, I don't even know how you protest that, but that is one of the biggest crimes, I believe, of COVID, is that the way that it's twisted people's minds to believe something that isn't even true by the own scientific standards, by the CDC standards. This, all the time people want to talk about, get into conversation about the numbers and things. I don't need to debate the numbers. As I just talked to you and justified the stances that I take on things, I didn't reference anybody other than the CDC. I didn't need to go reference an article wrote by this doctor or that doctor and this doctor. I don't need to. I can look at the CDC numbers and say, rationally speaking, giving this to your child, I don't see how you can do it if you're thinking rationally. I just don't. And I'm sorry if you disagree, but I just don't see how you can do it rationally. All right, going on to Liz Cheney. CNN fawning over Liz Cheney, which is real funny because her father, I'm assuming didn't like too much. I mean, recently there's a movie made all about her father, and it was made by the liberal Hollywood, and they none too liked her father. But suddenly, Liz Cheney has become the wonderful individual for CNN to fawn over. CNN's here saying she's a standard view of the Republican ideas that won the Cold War. And we really want those in there, and they don't like Trump and everything else. Well, you know, what it boils down to with the Liz Cheney thing, what's called spade a spade. The Democrats don't like this new direction the Republican Party's going in because they are fighting back. We are fighting back. The Republican Party isn't laying down anymore. We are fighting back. And any of the old guard leadership that likes to get on while they suck up their corporate dollars is no longer welcomed in the Republican Party. The people of the Republican Party are saying, if you're the type where you'd rather warmonger and send our children and young men and women to go die in foreign countries so you can line the pockets of Raytheon and other defense contractors, you are no longer welcome. Meanwhile, you get elected by false words and policy positions that you never follow through on that say, I'm going to make a difference, I'm going to change things, I'm going to shrink the size of government, when really all you do is spend more money dropping more bombs on foreign countries while you're paying off the defense contractors who got you into office. And they don't like this new Republican Party that doesn't like corporatism. They don't like it. They don't like it because it doesn't fulfill their needs, the corporate welfare. They don't like it that now the Republican Party isn't making room for those individuals. We are not making room for people who believe government is a solution. We are only making room for people who know government may be a necessary problem, a necessary evil. I know people out there that believe it's an unnecessary evil. We can debate about that some other day. By the time we get to a point where that debate matters, I think the world will be better off for it. But for now, we're not making space for anybody who believes government can solve our problems. That's the real problem. That's the real issue with Liz Cheney. They call it Trumpism because they think it's about Trump, and it has never been about Trump. It never was about Trump. It was about the ideas that he embodied. And he embodied those ideas because he wasn't an establishment politician. He was a gentleman who came along and said, yeah, I got my flaws. We all have flaws. I've got my flaws. Sometimes we all know he lied about his flaws when we all like, come on, man. We know that part's true. We all know you paid Stormy Daniels. It's okay. We don't care. But, you know, he had his flaws and everything else. But more importantly, he came along and said, no. Government needs to get out of your life. The regulation's bad. And he's saying this as somebody who's manipulated the government before to achieve it. And they think it's about Trump, and it wasn't ever about Trump. They call it Trumpism because they don't want to call it what it is. Liberty and freedom. People standing up for their individual rights. People saying, I don't want my tax dollars to go to funding another Coca-Cola plant, another sports stadium. I don't want my tax dollars to go to corporate welfare. I don't want my tax dollars to go to you paying off defense contractors while our brave men and women in the military die overseas. And Liz Cheney represents that party. The party that says they stood for the things we stand for, but never followed through. And they like that party more, they realize. So now they're fawning over Liz Cheney and trying to put down people as, well, they're just a cult of Trump or blah, 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 blah. It's not about Trump. For a lot of you listening to this, you realize this might be the first time I've ever really talked about Trump for any length of time. Because these ideas predate Trump. Trump was just the first real politician to come along and move in that direction and honestly do it. Like I said, he had a lot of flaws. Did a lot of things I didn't like. I didn't like the bump stock ban. I didn't like it. It was wrong. And that wasn't pro-Second Amendment. But it was still a heck of a lot better than what we've been getting. And what we've been getting is these people, once again, that believe government will solve your problems. So it's not Trumpism. It's a realization that government is bad. And as you hear that, a lot of people sit there and say, government's bad. That is a radical idea. That is what our founding fathers believed. They believed that. They debated for hours and months over how to form a government after they broke off from the British, what that government would look like and how it would work, because they didn't want to just subjugate us to another master. The whole way our government was designed was to be a check and balance on humans and human nature. But instead, it's given way to corporatism. And the Democrats want to keep it that way. They don't like this new Republican Party direction it's going. They don't like this new direction. They don't like it because we're actually fighting back. So they're going to prop up people like Liz Cheney and say, oh, look at this true conservative woman, but yet she's standing up for her principles and her rights. And, the Republicans are just going to sell her down the river because they can't stand for truth anymore. When actually, people like Liz Cheney are nothing but lies. I thank you guys for joining me. Please share it out. Listen to the podcast. If you don't, check out Fresh Brewed Kentucky Politics. That's the podcast on Spotify, on the Apple. Tell a friend about us. Share it. Hit the share button. Subscribe if you're on the podcast. Stop by the coffee shop. Go online, brewedco.com, brewedco.com. You can buy our beans offline if you don't live in Lexington. We also now are selling our beans out on Lake Harrington, the Sunset Grill and Marina. Stop by there, pick up some beans, some K-Cups. I'll thank you guys so much. You have a great day.